Life is full of challenges. How to live, how to love, how to make an iPhone speaker out of a toilet roll. But where there are problems, there are great minds in search of a solution. The tracks of progress have not yet been laid. The route to tomorrow has its own special timetable. Come, journey with me on the replacement bus service of human ingenuity, carrying the dreams of the past and the technology of the present to the ominously deserted station car park of the future. This episode: Boredom. What can we do to make the human existence an exhilarating adventure rather than I Spy on a long car journey? Join us as we investigate. From the BBC Problematorium, it's Big Problems with Helen Keen.
Thank you. Sometimes a scientist works with a very specific goal in mind, like building a rocket engine or reversing the formula before she completely turns into a fly. But today, we're looking at something a little bit more nebulous, solving the ultimate problem that arises out of having overcome all the other problems: boredom. Helping me solve the messed up Rubik's Cube of modern life, please welcome the voice of doom.
Hello.
In the modern world, we are terrified of boredom. We think we deserve to be constantly stimulated, which can make it difficult and dissatisfying to be holding down, well, any job at all, really. Certainly all the ones I've ever had. But also, even performing the most necessary everyday tasks.
Oh, God. Do I have to shower again? Will this meaningless drudgery never end?
19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote,
"Life presents itself first and foremost as a task, the task of maintaining itself. If this task is accomplished, what has been gained is a burden, and there then appears a second task, that of doing something with it so as to ward off boredom, which hovers over every secure life like a bird of prey."
Quite right, Arthur Schopenhauer. Who hasn't at some point felt the winged shadow of that great bird fall across their daily life?
See also the hawk of tedium, the kestrel of ennui, and the chicken of at a bit of a loose end.
Some labour experts of the past were convinced that by the early 21st century, human leisure would be changed forever by robots. Either the working week would shrink to a few hours because the machines would do everything for us, or it would grow to all the hours all day, every day after they'd attacked and enslaved us.
Neither of these has happened, unless you count the time a robot vacuum cleaner ate that sleeping woman's hair.
We're not sipping cocktails in a high-tech utopia, but there are still all these hours to fill. What part will technology play in keeping us entertained? In fact, there's a new dream. For some, a hope. For others, not so much.
That life will become a game. A game that we play at work and, well, at play. A game where even the most tedious tasks will be transformed from things we have to do into things we want to do, are addicted to doing even. And it's happening already. It's called gamification.
Gamification is undeniably a horrible word that can only have come from marketing speak.
So if we gamify the campaign, the winnertunity we create for clients will be fundamental.
But the idea itself is really very simple. It means using the mechanics of games by setting up rules, giving out rewards, and encouraging competition with others, and applying those mechanics to things that aren't usually thought of as play. So, when you collect points every time you buy something, or a website shows you a progress bar as you complete your profile, or you win with a bid on eBay, you've already been lured onto the teacup ride of gamification.
Some people regard gamification as a useful technique to increase enthusiasm for routine tasks. Others see it as the slippery slope to a dystopian nightmare where everything is an enforced game and feral children in fingerless gloves fight each other to the death to collect loyalty points on packets of crisps.
Science fiction loves a futury world where social stability is ensured thanks to everyone devotedly following a savage and bloodthirsty game. One of my favourites is the 1970s classic Rollerball, which, as the name suggests, is a sort of post-apocalyptic roller derby merging gladiatorial combat with Starlight Express. It's also a film in which the US decides to end all wars everywhere and replace them with rollerball, an American sport which becomes hugely globally popular. So it's a premise which is entirely unbelievable from start to finish. As one of life's natural winners, I think that much is obvious. Gamification is definitely for me. And the idea of giving out points or prizes to motivate people is really not a new one. Napoleon observed with a callous Gallic cynicism.
A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of coloured ribbon.
And so, it turns out, will a 6-year-old girl in the John Lewis haberdashery sale. I won that one too. As I say, I'm a winner. And you can be too. In order to increase your motivation to listen at home, or in the case of our studio audience, to remain seated, facing the right way, and not drunkenly singing while throwing broken bottles at the stage, we have gamified this show.
You are now being taken upon a magical journey that only superficially seems like a radio program. To do this, we're introducing Big Problem Points. You, the studio audience, stroke listener, stroke mindless consumer drone, will gain a point every time you spot the mystery word. Trowel.
This quest will lift you out of the everyday tedium of your humdrum life, slay the buzzard of indifference, and lead you to embrace your destiny as a big problems word wizard.
16 points required. No cash alternative, no cash value.
We will work these mystery words seamlessly into the show, so keep your ears peeled.
Could you pass me that trowel, Helen?
Why, of course. Here's that trowel you were asking for. Susie, would you also like a trowel, the voice of doom? That's 4 free mentions of the mystery word we have given you already. This is because...
We at the Problematorium value your customer loyalty.
Obviously, but it's also to kickstart what is known as the endowed progress effect. This is an odd phenomenon where artificial advancement actually seems to increase effort. You see a lot of this on the sort of loyalty cards where you collect stamps with each visit. Quite often, you'll be given a new card that's already been stamped a few times.
But don't be fooled. It's not generosity, it's a cunning psychological mind trick.
By giving you 4 free big problems points, we've made this a task that you've started but haven't completed, rather than a task so tedious you can't even be bothered to begin.
Businesses do this because there's evidence that incomplete tasks linger in the mind more than unstarted ones. So in theory, giving a child a couple of free examination passes should motivate them to get loads more. Which is how GCSEs work.
These 4 free points also mean that you're slightly nearer to the game's spectacular finale. And tests have shown that people and animals who feel that they are closer to a final goal will exert more effort to reach it. When researchers have watched rats running through mazes, they've seen that the closer they get to their food reward, the faster they run. If you put them in a harness, the harder they'll pull.
Just one more step and the cheese will be mine!
So, what games and loyalty schemes often do is to make the initial steps incredibly easy just to get you started, because they know that'll make it harder for you to stop.
And by giving the whole thing rules, it becomes something greater than a random activity. Tell people to roll around in the mud, in the rain, in their vest and pants, and they'll likely decline. Tell them it's rugby, and they'll bite your hand off. Maybe even literally.
Yes, throughout history, people have been trying to pass the time with games. The oldest board game that we know about has been found in Egyptian burials from 3500 BC.
The game was called Senet, and boards were often placed in the grave alongside other objects, useful for passing the time on the long journey through the afterlife.
I spy, with my little eye, something beginning with A.
Is it Anubis guiding me across the threshold of death?
No, it's A, rock.
Are we nearly there yet?
Historically, a lot of the entertainment that lifted people out of the tedium and suffering of everyday life involved inflicting suffering on others.
The human desire for entertainment has long had its dark side. Gladiatorial combat, public hangings, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
But one of the earliest stories about the development of games is as a way to avoid suffering rather than sitting down with some popcorn and revelling in it.
Herodotus tells us of the ancient kingdom of Lydia, now part of Turkey, where there was a terrible famine. The Lydians invented games using dice, knucklebones, and balls to take their minds off the hunger. So they would eat one day, then play games all the next day to stop themselves thinking about food.
I'm hungry. What's for tea?
Nothing today. We're playing Buckaroo!
According to Herodotus, this went on for 18 years.
Is it Master Bun, the baker's son? Oh, God.
Today, we're used to being able to play incredibly sophisticated computer games on our phones. Extraordinary when you consider that the first electronic game was invented in 1947.
The game was based on World War II radar displays.
Players had to adjust knobs to angle light beams and hit targets that were stuck to the screen on a clear overlay. It was called
The Cathode Ray Tube Amusement Device. Not available commercially. Ever.
Playing a game can keep you focused and distract you from the unpleasantness of everyday life. And that's why gamification is being enthusiastically embraced by businesses who want to motivate their staff as well as their customers. For most of human history, work has been a drudge, a necessary daily agony, a back-breaking grind, a treadmill, a rat race. But suddenly, it's not enough for employment to pay the bills and get you out of the house. It has to be enjoyable too. This change of attitude towards play in the workplace really started with the dot-com bubble of the 1990s, when lots of young, unconventional tech companies appeared and were ready to tear up the rules about how you had to behave in the office.
These Segway-riding, frisbee-tossing, mochaccino-slurping CEOs created a new monster. Fun.
And now there's an entire industry of fun-sultants and fun-facilitators ready to help stuffier companies loosen up. The next time you decide to fun-sult at your workplace, you might like to take some advice from Lessons from the Sandbox, using the 13 gifts of childhood to rediscover the keys to business success. Fun. If anyone might be expected to get it right, you'd think it would be someone like Disney. But when the home of Mickey Mouse began to use a form of gamification to keep productivity high amongst its hotel workers, not everyone felt like they were at the happiest place on earth.
The company installed monitors in some of its hotel laundry rooms, which displayed the efficiency scores of those who worked there as they loaded towels and bedding into the washing machines.
The LA Times interviewed Isabel Barrera, who'd been employed by Disney for 8 years and who was making $11.94 an hour. She said, "I was nervous, and I felt that I was being controlled even more." She began calling the new system the electronic whip, and the name stuck. It's been a while since I've seen any Disney movies, but I don't really remember them glorying in this sort of competitiveness.
Why, it's 7 men, and you're all much shorter than average. Don't say your names out loud. I can guess them. You must be bashful.
Woohoo.
And you look like Sleepy. And you must be consistently highly productive.
Affirmative.
I think there's a point here that will be familiar to anyone who, like me, had their school life blighted by compulsory PE lessons. A game's not fun if you're being forced to play it.
People have to want to play the game in the first place, and then they need to want to keep playing it. And one way to keep them doing this is to reward them for it. Generously. Trowel it on, really.
This is where gamification can be genuinely innovative in how it encourages desirable behaviour. In Sweden, there was recently a test of a new type of speed camera. Most are set up these days so that if you're caught speeding, the camera will take a photo, read your licence plate, and automatically send you a fine. This speed camera was set up so it also noted cars that were obeying the speed limit. People who were driving at an appropriate speed were automatically put into a lottery, with the money from the lottery coming from the fines of drivers who broke the speed limits. When the system was trialled, the average speed dropped by about 20%.
Some people believe that the benefit a games format has over most things we do in real life is that in a game you have constant feedback about how well you're doing, particularly networked games that you play online. In a job, you might have an annual review, but if your work is gamified, chances are you'll be able to see immediately who's processing invoices fastest, who's selling the most cars, and who's cleaning the floor most efficiently.
If you think you can avoid this sort of competition, it's already too late. With the rise of social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter, you're constantly being ranked.
Because who doesn't want to know exactly how popular they are in comparison with all their friends?
It's like I've never escaped junior school.
I like Amy, I like Alison, I like Kelly, but I don't like you, Helen Keen. I don't like that picture you drew of a sad donkey, and I'm going to not like it publicly until the end of electricity.
And status is a really big deal to human beings for practical reasons other than income. There's evidence that it affects our health, even how long we live. A 2007 study of Nobel Prize winners found that of the people in the running for a Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry, those who won lived on average 1.4 years longer than those who were nominated but didn't win.
Oh, sorry, Helen, I've got a message here for you from a Mr. T. Rowell.
Thank you very much. Yes, now, a big criticism of gamification is that by turning simple steps at work or in the marketplace into activities that get rewards, what's happening isn't gameplay, it's conditioning. We're being trained.
Psychologist B.F. Skinner believed that human free will is an illusion. He thought any human action was guided by its consequences. If it's rewarded, it's reinforced, and it'll be repeated. If not, then it probably won't. What if that's all we are? A complicated collection of responses to rewards.
When it came to animals, Skinner's reward-based conditioning produced astonishing results. During World War II, he trained pigeons to act as guidance systems for missiles by teaching them to peck an image on a screen. His system was actually a total success, but the project was abandoned by the top brass. Skinner said sadly,
"Our problem was no one would take us seriously."
"My own very serious research in the Problematorium supports his results. Using laboratory rats with voices genetically developed to be identical to Radio 4 presenters, I'm training them to take over their roles."
And now the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office. There are warnings of gales in...
There's a cat! There's a cat! Someone's let a cat in! Help me!
Are we just experimental rats in the laboratory of life, forever chasing the unattainable cheese?
Before you become too concerned with being manipulated by the man, it's worth bearing in mind that mind control may come from a source even more Machiavellian than big business. Cats.
The idea that our felines may be toying with us, controlling us, making us their playthings in a mysterious game may not be entirely news to anyone who has whiled away hours watching cats on the internet, or who indeed finds themselves owned by a cat.
Purr, meow. I has complete control of your human destiny.
Actually, it's not exactly cats that we have to fear, but microscopic parasitic creatures who live inside them. Jaroslav Flegra, a Czech biologist, has gradually become convinced that he is not fully in control of his own actions. Flegra couldn't understand how his friends worried so much about dangers he just shrugged off. In nature, biologists have observed tiny parasites that seize control of other creatures and make them behave in uncharacteristic and counterproductive ways that serve the invading parasite's end rather than their hosts. There are many examples of this, so Flegra began to consider the possibility that he, and some other humans too, were the giant meat puppets for a single-celled master manipulator. He spent years studying these minuscule villains called Toxoplasma gondii, or Toxo, and came to the conclusion that they were indeed toying with him, using him as a pawn in their plan to travel from the gut of one cat to that of another cat, where they could sexually reproduce.
Rats who have become infected by Toxo behave strangely. Normal rats are terrified of cat pee, but Toxo-infected rats are drawn to the smell of it. The organism rewires circuits in parts of the brain that deal with such primal emotions as fear, anxiety, and sexual arousal. Basically, infected rats will frolic in front of cats in a freely uninhibited, sexy way.
Well, hello, kitty!
Making them much more likely to get caught by cats and end up, infection and all, inside of a cat gut.
It seems humans are not entirely useful to Toxo in its aim of reaching a new feline host. It may only infect us accidentally, but the effects are, well, odd.
Compared with uninfected men, males who have the toxoparasite are more introverted, suspicious, oblivious to other people's opinions of them, and inclined to disregard rules. Infected women are exactly the opposite.
It's very weird. And researchers think this may not be the only tiny organism controlling us. There's evidence that people with the flu have a stronger than usual urge to socialise during the early stages when they're at their most infectious, giving the virus the opportunity to spread. The degree to which we're ever fully in control of our decisions and behaviours may well have been wildly overestimated.
We still can't escape gamification. But there may come a time when the games aren't just in a smartphone or on a website or stamped onto a loyalty card. There may come a time when the games are able to invade every aspect of our lives. Gameageddon.
Gameageddon is going to be possible because of the coming of
The Internet of Things.
an ominous, imposing phrase like the Siege of Leningrad, the Fall of Rome, the Chronicles of Narnia. But essentially, it's a Wi-Fi controlled washing machine, so maybe don't panic just yet.
The Internet of Things.
It's the network of physical objects that are embedded with electronics, software and sensors, and therefore are able to communicate. So, for instance, your bedroom lights, your central heating or your coffee maker could all be controlled by systems on the internet rather than by you having to get up and press a button. If you've got a smartphone, you'll already be used to the idea that an object you carry around is constantly sending and receiving information. Most of the time that's fine. Sometimes it feels weirdly intrusive. I've got a free torch app on my phone and I feel like I'm being creepily blackmailed every time I use it.
I'd like to put the torch on, please.
No problem. All you have to do is give me access to your location and to your email and to your full contact list.
With technology's decreasing costs and decreasing size, there will come a time when most household items will have a camera, a screen you can interact with, and a Wi-Fi connector. While everything you own will be able to detect everything you do and will be constantly talking to everything else. And anyone with access to the
Things.
around you will be able to find out just about anything about you.
In the 18th century, philosopher Jeremy Bentham developed an idea for a prison that would allow a single guard to watch all the inmates. Cells were arranged in a big circle around a central inspection house, and the prisoner would never be sure whether or not they were under surveillance. He called this the panopticon.
When I was a temp, I used to think the nearest thing we actually had to the panopticon prison was the open plan office. Makes it practically impossible to check Facebook. With the coming of
The Internet of Things.
the panopticon could be anywhere that you are. Bentham would probably have quite liked this idea. He thought transparency was brilliant. His ideal was a prophetic situation where
The whole globe itself will become a gymnasium in which every man exercises himself before the eyes of every other man. Every gesture, every turn of limb or feature, in those whose motions have a visible impact on the general happiness, will be noticed and marked down.
yeah, well, Jeremy Bentham, how was I meant to know it was frowned upon to eat oxtail soup on the Stairmaster?
What happens to you when you want to opt out of the Wi-Fi panopticon? When you don't want to play the game by their rules?
There's a relentless peppy cheeriness to a lot of electronic interaction. I sometimes feel my Twitter account is like an over-enthusiastic mother who's trying really, really hard to bolster my ego because she knows my life's gone a bit wrong and I'm sort of on a knife edge. It's always,
Somebody's mentioned you on Twitter! Exclamation mark! Or somebody favorited your tweet! Exclamation mark!
for which the subtext is,
And I'd never have believed it if I did not have the evidence here in front of me! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark!
and when
The Internet of Things.
is established, gamified to encourage desirable behaviour, I do worry that it'll be just as eager to offer support. So, on just a typical day in the future, you'll wake up and your alarm will sense that you've got out of bed.
Congratulations, Helen Keen.
You have woken up before midday for the third day in a row.
You'll go to your bathroom and sensors in your flannel will know you've cleaned yourself.
Congratulations! You have performed personal hygiene tasks to an adequate level. You are now 13th on your friendship leaderboard for human sanitation.
As our show draws to a close, it's time for us to bring the magical Big Problems game to a juddering halt.
If you reached 16 trowels, then you have risen to be a Big Problems word wizard, and you may now proceed to the next level. An episode of Gardener's Question Time, where they will subtly hide the word plutonium into their audio.
So, what's the net result here? Are we entering a future where our lives will be controlled and our conformity ensured by games?
Games to help us get to work on time. Games to help us finish tedious jobs. Games to make us care about a particular brand of toilet cleaner.
Not necessarily. The best games aren't about collecting points or stamps, though as someone who does collect actual stamps, I can say that it's not a game, it's a very serious activity. The best games are creative, imaginative, collaborative. You have a goal, but how you reach it is up to you. In this sense, the Toxoparasite is probably a better games designer than most marketing firms.
Meow. That's right. Get closer to the cat, using your own skill and judgment.
Jane McGonigal, who's a very inspiring American games designer, has high hopes for a future of gaming where participants are directed towards solving real-world problems rather than lining up for jelly beans. She estimated that in the initial 16 years of World of Warcraft, gamers had spent a total of 5.93 million years solving problems online. An incredible resource if it can be tapped.
And maybe this is the way forward. Games, not to sell coffee or to alleviate boredom, but games to change the world.
So, in her words, let the world-changing games begin. Thank you all very much, and see you in the future!
Big Problems with Helen Keen was written by Helen Keen and Miriam Underhill, with thanks to Professor Richard Trowell Wiseman. It was performed by Helen Keen, Peter Serafinowicz and Susy Kane. The producer was Gareth Edwards. It was a BBC Radio comedy production.